The Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference is coming to Dallas, Texas, February 16, 17, and 18 in 2018. If you know of a better way to get the latest insider knowledge about crypto, to hear directly from the top minds in this field, to interact personally with 800 fellow crypto lovers, hodlers, investors, miners, traders, developers, and founders, then I'd like to hear about it. If you don't, then you don't want to miss out. Register today for the Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference. Go to bitcoinsuperconference.com and register today as a super early bird to get the lowest rates on tickets and hotel rooms. That's bitcoinsuperconference.com.
Welcome to Almost Here, Round the Corner Future Technology Podcasts with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies poised to transform our lives for better or worse are the focus of this podcast. Almost Here means these technologies are now here and starting to be used, or just around the corner, from Bitcoin to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Future Tech Podcast. My name is Chris Amser. Our guest today is Paul Makowski with Polyswarm.io. Welcome, Paul.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Definitely. So tell us more about Polyswarm.io.
Yeah, so what Polyswarm is it's an effort to fix various different issues in the threat intelligence market. So the threat intelligence market is kind of a superset of what people view as the antivirus market. It includes things like IDS, IPS, but cybersecurity in general. So threat intelligence refers to being able to detect the latest malware, being able to defend against it, and being able to protect your enterprises against it. So the way that the market works right now, today, is there's kind of a cycle where a newcomer comes in with a fresh new idea, and they capitalize on that idea, build a business around it. If they're successful, it's a successful business, and they kind of go into maintenance mode. And then it kind of takes another newcomer to come in and innovate again. So there's a cycle where defense gets the upper hand for a bit, then offense kind of improves their arsenal, and then defense has to innovate again. And this cycle, we'd like to tighten up this cycle. So the way that we're doing that is by building what we think are better economic incentives for three classes of people to participate in, namely security experts, enterprises / end users, really any kind of consumer, and what we call ambassadors. And ambassadors are the companies like McAfee, Symantec, Kaspersky, et cetera, that currently operate in this space, but could benefit from what we're trying to build by gaining access to crowdsourced threat intelligence.
Okay.
In brief, we're developing a new market using Ethereum smart contracts in a fully decentralized manner, where we're not in the middle, where the participants have better reasons to interact and better ways to interact with one another.
So the incentive to interact is to really head off the cyber threats that are out there today and the developing cyber threats. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So in real brief, the way that Polyswarm works is it's kind of a little bit of a twist on a prediction market. So perhaps some of your listeners are familiar with prediction markets. Basically, you have a bunch of people staking their opinion on what's going to happen in the future, and then using those staked opinions to make decisions about how to do things like what to plant crop-wise in an agricultural setting. So you'd have prediction markets that basically try to predict how the climate is going to change, how the weather is going to go. What we're building is a prediction market where security experts are predicting whether or not a file or network traffic or URL is malicious, and they're rewarded based on those assertions if they're correct. So real briefly, you have, say, 5 different security experts that take a look at a suspect file that may or may not be malware. 3 security experts think it is malware. 2 think it's benign. 2 think it's not malware. And they stake a certain amount of Nectar, which is the name of our crypto token, on that assertion. When ground truth comes into play and says, hey, this thing actually was malicious, or hey, this thing actually was benign, the people who were wrong had their escrowed Nectar released to the people who are right. So it redistributes tokens to security experts who essentially got it wrong to security experts who got it right. So it behooves security experts to continually to hone and fine-tune what we call micro-engines that they're developing to detect the latest malware. So it incentivizes continuous innovation, and it also incentivizes finding a specialty. So taking a step back real quick, in today's market, if you can imagine a Venn diagram where the rectangle represents all the malware an enterprise might face, then you have several large circles in that Venn diagram. One might be McAfee, one might be Symantec, and we've spoken with these companies, by the way. They cover a large portion of the landscape, but their coverage largely overlaps with their competitors. And the reason for that is severalfold. One is, it's very difficult to make the sales arguments that, hey, I'm an antivirus company and I don't detect something like WannaCry, right? Perhaps everyone listening to this has heard of the allegedly North Korean ransomware. Actually, the U.S. government has come out and affirmatively said that it was North Korea. Kind of interesting. It's very rare for the U.S. government to do that. Rob Joyce is heading up that effort and is changing a lot of things. I think for the good. Somebody I used to work with, actually. So if you don't detect widespread threats that are grabbing headlines, something like WannaCry, which grabbed headlines for causing like hospitals in the UK to shut down and put lives at risk, then it's real easy to not buy your antivirus product, right? And that probably makes sense on the face of it. But what happens behind the scenes is when everyone is trying to detect the same core set of threats, it's very difficult to branch out from that core set of threats. It's very difficult to make the argument to perhaps the C-suite to say, hey, we need to branch out, because the core competency is really what drives sales. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is I know a lot of security researchers at these threat intelligence companies, and they're always most interested in dissecting and taking apart the latest, more esoteric malware. But again, it's very difficult to make the sales argument that, hey, we detect this really cool strain of malware, and by the way, you're going to be hit by this really cool strain of malware. That argument for overlap between their customers being exposed and this cool, unique intelligence that they have is a very difficult argument to make. So what we'd like to do, going back to that Venn diagram visual, is instead of having several mostly overlapping large circles, what we'd like to do is spread it out and have thousands of smaller circles that cover more of the threat landscape. So what we'd like to do is, what Polyswarm is an effort to create a marketplace that incentivizes security experts to build micro-engines that find their niche among the threat intelligence landscape. And so when you ask in a crowdsourced manner all of the security experts that are plugged into Polyswarm what they think about this particular file, you're going to get a response that has much broader coverage than today's market produces, just simply based on the economics there. So it's very much an economic design.
So that economic design is definitely filling gaps that are left around from the maintenance aspect that you're mentioning earlier. So
right.
How do you think that will affect the other side, the people writing the malware, the people sending corrupt files and URLs and things of that nature? Do you think it'll deter it? Or do you think it'll, okay.
So great question. So I'm not sure, to a large extent, people writing malware that is used for economic reasons, people writing crimeware, for example, that are financially motivated to, say, compromise ATMs or compromise people's home computers and steal bank account details, et cetera. Those sort of people are going to continue to be motivated by economic pressures. What we hope Polyswarm will produce is simply a higher cost for them to do business. So there's fewer places for them to hide. So if you, again, in today's situation, it's unfortunately not too difficult to slip under the radar. In tomorrow's situation with Polyswarm, what we're hoping is that it becomes much more difficult because you have thousands of security experts, again, trying to find their niche. And there's going to be fewer places to hide. There's going to be it's going to demand more innovative work on the behalf of attackers, which is, if we're talking about economics, really just comes down to cost. So we hope to put cost pressure on the people that are conducting crime via malware. there's another totally very interesting discussion we could have on people who are not necessarily motivated by financial reward, but perhaps by espionage, et cetera. But this new marketplace, Polyswarm, will not provide any quarter, or at least that's the goal.
Of course.
There'll be fewer places to hide. So it should increase attack cost is what we're going for there.
So having those cells essentially in the crowdsource of not only being aware, but actively having the incentive to, essentially predict and eliminate these threats is that's fantastic. When do you see, where are you in your implementation for Polyswarm right now?
Great question. So that's actually an excellent lead into a contest that we're running right now as well. But before we go too far down that route, one of the benefits that I think Polyswarm brings relative to today's market is imposing costs on attackers in terms of transparency. So Polyswarm is built on the Ethereum blockchain using Ethereum smart contracts. And when people ask in a crowdsourced manner, hey, is this file malicious or benign, there's going to be an immutable record of all of these different assertions from security experts on a particular piece of malware. So unlike today's situation where your malware might fly under the radar, in tomorrow's situation, there's going to be much more of there's going to be a ledger of sorts that brings sheds some light and brings some transparency to the attack life cycle. So there's a parallel there with, and perhaps your readers or your listeners, have heard of this. Certificate transparency in the browser space is an effort to bring transparency to attacks that involve compromising certificate authorities and then abusing their certificate authority signing process to issue fraudulent HTTPS or SSL certificates. So this happened not too long ago. Iran forced one of their local certificate authorities to hand their private keys over to the government, and then they used those private keys to impersonate Google on the internet for the purpose of harvesting their own citizens' usernames and passwords. So Google's response to this was to spearhead an effort to introduce certificate transparency, where basically everyone that uses Chrome and a few other browsers at this point, they effectively snitch on certificate authority. So if there's one certificate that one Chrome user sees that nobody else sees, well, maybe that's suspect. So in the Polyswarm system, that same sort of transparency is going to be brought to malware. It's going to be much more difficult to fly under the radar without any trace of anyone having seen your malware. So back to your question, where are we in development? So we have a contest going on right now. And our token sale is going to launch on February 20th. But right now, anyone can participate in a malware bounty contest. And we think this is a really cool concept. So to get security experts on board with our platform, we're offering up to $300,000 worth of Nectar for free for people to upload suspect files that an open source antivirus program called ClamAV detects as malicious. So there's a leaderboard. Security experts are competing against one another to submit unique malware strains. And this process is actually end to end in the sense that they will submit a file to us. We actually put it on Ringbee, which is a Ethereum testnet where our beta Polyswarm smart contracts live. That artifact is what they're called. The files or network traffic that people are submitting go out to the Ringbee testnet, and then our scanner picks it up on the back end, acts as a security expert would when Polyswarm is fully released, and renders an assertion on that artifact that's then read back out, and Nectar is awarded for the uniqueness of the sample and whether or not the sample satisfies a bonus malware family that we announce each day in our Telegram. So to be a bit more concise in that response, we have beta smart contracts out right now that we're using, that we're stress testing, that other people are using as well, that we're using to onboard security experts to the platform. The majority of what we would be funded to do via ICO is actually this community building, to be running contests like this. It's also the development of the smart contracts, of course, and the reference implementations that go into it. But a lot of this, we're making a market, so we have to make it thick on both sides. We have to encourage security experts an enterprise. Now, fortunately, what we're building is a bit of a two-sided market, so we have that advantage. It's similar in the sense to Lyft or Uber, where both sides are going to play off each other. As more security experts come on board, it becomes more attractive to enterprises. As more enterprises come on board, there's more payouts for security experts to claim. So it's kind of a two-sided market. And where we are right now is we have open source code on GitHub. It's github.com/Polyswarm. We also released a framework for developing Ethereum distributed applications in Go. My colleague Max Koo gave a talk on how to use this framework that he called Paragord, which is a type of truffle. Anyway, I won't go down that route right now, but he gave a presentation on that that's on our YouTube. But we have a lot more code that we're going to release after February 20th, simply because we want the code to look nicer before we hit publish. But everything we're developing is going to be open source. And like I said, right now we're kind of stress testing our beta smart contracts. So we're well on our way.
Well, it sounds like an extremely robust development cycle. And that makes sense, especially in the world of security, to have everything lined up before a full release. So I know $300,000 in Nectar could definitely be a high incentive to help get that out there. Any final thoughts that you have before we wrap up today?
I would encourage your listeners to check out Polyswarm.io, and if they are particularly if they're security experts with some unique malware samples, I encourage them to go to tokensale.polyswarm.io and compete in our contest. We're handing out Nectar, and we'd love to have you on board. I mean, those are the high points. Those are we'd like to engage the community, and that kind of starts now. And we appreciate opportunities like this to speak to people that are already plugged into tech and security experts as well. So we'll be running a bunch of additional competitions, and we will of course be holding our token sale on February 20th. So we encourage you to check that out as well. We hope to see you on the platform.
All right. Paul Makowski with Polyswarm.io. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the Future Tech Podcast.
The Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference is coming to Dallas, Texas, February 16, 17, and 18 in 2018. If you know of a better way to get the latest insider knowledge about crypto, to hear directly from the top minds in this field, to interact personally with 800 fellow crypto lovers, hodlers, investors, miners, traders, developers, and founders, then I'd like to hear about it. If you don't, then you don't want to miss out. Register today for the Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Blockchain Super Conference. Go to bitcoinsuperconference.com and register today as a super early bird to get the lowest rates on tickets and hotel rooms. That's bitcoinsuperconference.com.
You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.